Korea's COVID-19 strategy is looking ahead to a new test as it seeks to keep Omicron under control amid a predicted uptick in public activity to mark the extended Lunar New Year holiday. For more, I have Dr. Kim Seung-taek from Institute Pasteur Korea. Welcome back, Dr. Kim.
Good afternoon.
I also have Dr. Alice Hyung-kyung-dan at Ms. Medi Women's Hospital live on the line. Dr. Dan, it's good to see you again.
Thank you for having me.
Right, Dr. Kim, Korea's daily tally has been hovering above 10,000 for 3 straight days, but the number of patients in critical condition remains on the 300 level. When do you suppose that number will perhaps surge to better reflect the number of escalating cases here?
Well, to answer that question, we need to understand the sort of just a disease course of this COVID-19. So a typical disease course is that once we just expose the virus actually enter mostly just the lung and the baby, or in the case of Omicron, is upper respiratory tract, and then starts some replication. So then, and then at one time, when the viral load increases at some point, then we can just start to feel some symptoms. So this period between the exposure and the symptoms onset is the some incubation period. This incubation period is, well, formally for the variants is typically the 4 to 5 days. But now some reports said maybe Omicron, maybe it is getting just shorter. And then after that, that we feel symptoms, and then there's some typical course of the first phase of the disease is some viral replication phase, which is we can actually treat with, we can actually deal with some monoclonal antibodies or like some Paxlovid oral just antiviral drugs. And then later, if the disease does not resolve, then the infected person can go to some moderate or just a severe COVID-19. So it does actually takes time, depending on the some person. Maybe it can go up to like a couple of weeks, maybe 1 week or like a couple of weeks.
Right, I see. Dr. Dan, new U.S. data shows Omicron fatalities have surpassed those recorded during Delta's peak. Having said that, do you see a similar scenario perhaps unfolding here in Korea?
Well, that is my biggest concern right now. And the reason why I say this is because already we're seeing the number of cases who are age 60 and older increase. That inflection point seems to have been January 18th. That's when we stopped seeing that decrease in cases that were older, in that older population group. And now we are seeing more and more cases who are age 60 and older. Yesterday, we had more than 1,100 of these cases. We're also seeing an increase in hospital admissions. Never before in the history of the pandemic in Korea did we have a single day hospital admission load greater than 1,000. Yet yesterday, we had 1,017 new hospital admissions due to COVID-19. Still, we have more than 6 million people in our country who have not even started their first shot of COVID-19 vaccines. And the population third dose booster rate is just slightly over 50%. So I think what we really need to do is stay focused, coordinate our efforts, and really work as a team to try to identify our high-risk patients early on within that window of opportunity to get them treated with remdesivir or with Paxlovid. And that's really the only way that we can avoid that similar fate of high deaths and hospitalizations due to the Omicron surge.
Right. And staying with findings in the U.S. and more, Dr. Kim, research also shows Omicron now accounts for 99.9% of all COVID-19 infections over in the U.S. Does this reality mean that the Delta variant has been eradicated?
Well, I can tell for sure, but at this moment, the Omicron seems to be just more fit than the Delta. And when we actually talk about some viral fitness, we actually just we actually consider two different aspects. One of the things is whether this new virus or a certain virus is has a more advantage in terms of virus replication. And the other aspect is whether this is in terms of just host aspect, maybe just host immune response. It's how just the host immune response affects some viral replication. So they are actually just we actually weighing two different aspects. And then recently there was a very interesting report from Denmark. And then the study actually compares the Delta infection and the Omicron infection. And that actually addressed both just virus replication and also some any immune responses. And very interestingly, the Omicron, well, this is basically just to address the some transmissibility of the Omicron. The answer to the question is that basically it's a viral load from the two different patients, whether it is Delta and Omicron, very similar. The viral load from the patient was very similar, but then one of the major difference from these two different viruses, the immune evasiveness. So what we know so far about the Omicron compared to other prior variants is that this Omicron has a lot of just mutation, like some over 30 of a mutation on the spike protein, and that this spike protein is just a major determinant, actually the major target of our vaccine that we actually using right now. So if there are more mutation, and the chances are the antibody that were actually generated by our prior vaccine somehow do not help very much. Although our T cell response is pretty good. So at this moment, this immune evasiveness is a major sort of advantage that Omicron variant has compared to the Delta variant right now.
Right, I see. And moving forward, Dr. Tan, I understand that relevant information is evolving, but what can you share with us about the so-called stealth Omicron that has been detected in quite a number of countries, including here in Korea, as pointed out by my colleague Yeon earlier on?
Right, so the so-called stealth variant is a subvariant of the Omicron variant. It's called BA.2. And investigators are still looking into the characteristics of this variant. The reason why we call it the stealth variant is not because it's inherently more transmissible, but because it lacks the deletion at a specific location of the gene in the spike protein, so location 6970. And this deletion caused what was known as a S gene target failure on PCR tests, and it was used as a proxy for detecting Omicron cases when the background number of cases of Delta was high. And so what this means is epidemiologically, we will not be able to, in some cases, differentiate between Delta and Omicron if the Omicron subvariant is this BA2 subvariant. However, I think what we should use right now in terms of our basis for understanding is that for now, it does not seem to be more transmissible. It does not seem to evade our diagnostics. It does not seem to cause more severe disease. So I think there's no reason to panic. It's just a subvariant that was detected. And if we remember back to our Delta wave, very early on, we had one subvariant of the Delta variant that people were very concerned it might become dominant, but that just didn't seem to be the case. And that might be what happens eventually to this so-called stealth variant.
Right, which is why you're saying we don't have to panic right now then. Dr. Kim, a study of British adults published in The Lancet last autumn actually found that fully vaccinated COVID-19 patients are 49% less likely to suffer from long COVID. What more can you tell us about this?
Well, first of all, just in case, there are some people who don't understand the long COVID. I have to actually explain just what the long COVID means, and that there are some certain people even after just a recovery after acute COVID-19, there are people who are actually suffering from some post-acute COVID-19 sequelae. So this is typically the symptoms after the 4 weeks after the symptom onset. So the manifestation of these symptoms are very diverse. It's like some dozens of the symptoms, including like chronic fatigue, and then some joint pain, and then like a hair loss, and then the headache, and then brain fog, which is actually just cognitive disturbances. There are a lot of just the symptoms, and that's why actually even just now US NIH actually now start to just invest a lot of just money to just investigate this long COVID and then potential any therapeutics to deal with the symptoms. And then the vaccine actually seems to pretty just work against this this the long COVID, and this is not a new information. I mean, even just several months ago, we actually just aware of the effect of this vaccine against this long COVID. And then when we actually just finished the some vaccination schedule, then we after impacted with the some COVID-19 and the recovery, the chances of just experiencing long COVID is very, very low. And then very interesting thing is even after infection, I mean, without just the vaccination, we infected, and then after infected, we got just the vaccine. Then also that actually somehow very just a positive effect, just to reduce the chance of just the long COVID. So anyway, the vaccination seems to be a very good just strategy to deal with the long COVID and yeah, so that's the key element. But in terms of some mechanical correlation that how long COVID can be reduced by vaccination, we do not know the answer. But we actually have some correlation with the vaccination and the reduction of the some long COVID. That's all we know so far.
Right, so for those who are suffering from long COVID, getting a vaccine after infection has also served to ease their long COVID symptoms.
Exactly, yeah, but as soon as possible.
Okay, I see. Dr. Tan, local findings point to discrepancies in the level of protection generated by different vaccines. For instance, a person who had, let's say, 3 shots of Pfizer appeared to have made more antibodies than a person who received 2 shots of AstraZeneca, followed by a 3rd shot of Pfizer. What are the implications of such findings?
Well, 16.5% of all new COVID infections during the 2nd week of January were actually 3rd dose booster breakthrough infections. And so what we need to do is investigate very thoroughly the vaccination history of all of these 3rd dose booster breakthrough cases and follow them very carefully through their course of illness. I think we need to have a plan in place just in case it looks like a 3rd dose of Pfizer after either 1 or 2 doses of AstraZeneca causes decreased protection against severe disease due to the Omicron variant. We need to remember that more than 11 million people in our country received either 1 or 2 doses of AstraZeneca, and many of these AstraZeneca vaccine recipients are healthcare workers. And so we need to have a plan in place. Perhaps a 4th booster using Moderna might add a level of protection. Now, some reassuring news from the UK is that at 10 weeks after a 3rd dose booster, even though vaccine effectiveness against symptomatic disease due to Omicron went down to 45 to 50%, vaccine effectiveness against hospitalization due to Omicron at that 2.5-month time point remained quite high at 83%. So that is one bit of good news, but I think we do need to look very carefully as to what sort of clinical consequences decreased antibody levels have in people who received a 3rd dose of Pfizer after 1 or 2 doses of AstraZeneca.
Right, so more research is necessary at this moment as well. Dr. Kim, a great number of people will be offered the rapid antigen testing here in the country as part of efforts to boost our testing capacity. Having said that, do tell us a bit about the proper use of these rapid antigen tests.
Well, actually, recently there has been just a little bit of debate on the whether to use the some PCR method and then some rapid antigen test. And first of all, I think I have to just explain just a little bit about just a PCR test and then the rapid antigen test. Many people, I mean, this is a kind of known fact. The PCR test is obviously very, very sensitive because basically the PCR test is actually detecting some RNA fragments. This is some genetic material of the coronavirus. But not we actually detect just in itself. We actually amplifying these RNA fragments, exponential just amplification. So that's why this test is very, very sensitive. But for the rapid antigen test, there might be some way to just amplifying the signals, but the amplification cannot be compared to the PCR test. So in terms of sensitivity issues, RT-PCR is the much better. But sometimes this also detecting some viral just genetic material, even from sort of just dead viruses. So that's why we are saying just this is oversensitive. So one of the differences there for the PCR test, it takes time. like at least maybe the 2 to 3 hours after collecting the samples, so that if there are too many just the samples, then it'll just take time, like maybe more than like maybe one day or 2 days. So that's why maybe government now just trying to just replace the PCR-based test with the some rapid antigen test. In the case of rapid antigen test, this is just maybe just 15 minutes. That should be fine. And then once the samples are collected, we can actually just can tell just whether this person, at least, I mean, although sensitivity is low, we can tell roughly that the person is positive or just not. And then one of the some precautions with using this rapid antigen test is just sample collecting. Because many people will just try to use this test kit by themselves without the help from any just medical expert. So the sampling issues are just a key point. And then in Korea now we are using this test kits from the 3 different companies. And then as far as I know, the sampling procedure is almost identical from among those companies. And then basically we are actually collecting the samples from the nasal cavity, probably 1.5 centimeters deep, and then just swab the nasal cavity, and then just put some in buffer in the test tubes. So except for the sampling issues, I think others are pretty much just straightforward. But the critical the step that makes some error is that there's a sampling issues. So now in Korea we are not there's no any certain guidelines, but in some other countries actually recommended maybe blowing nose before just collecting samples. So that might be actually considered as well.
Right, I see. And Dr. Dan, come February 6, Korea's current COVID-19 prevention guidelines will end, and authorities have hinted at the likelihood of an extension. When do you suppose will it be necessary for authorities here to strengthen their containment measures?
That's a really good question, and I don't think this has been adequately addressed. And in my opinion, this is one part of our response that could have been improved upon during our most recent Delta wave. One thing that we know about the Omicron surge is that it really is like a tsunami. There is a huge number of patients who are sick all of a sudden within a short period of time. And so the risk of overwhelming regional healthcare systems is very high. So in my opinion, if hospital or ICU occupancy hits 50% in any region of our country, I think we should seriously consider strengthening our social distancing restrictions, because what we need is early forecasting and acting proactively against this surge. Otherwise, we could actually make the situation worse by debilitating our healthcare systems because of an overwhelming number of Omicron cases.
Right, and staying with containment efforts, Dr. Kim, what are your thoughts on such measures within perhaps the academic arena as schools look to resume classes soon?
Well, that's tough, because the people who are actually just attending the school, many actually just the schoolers are actually not eligible for the vaccination as of right now. So most of the restriction is actually basically the same as the before, the physical distancing and then so wearing masks. And then since now we have some rapid antigen tests, one of the additional just measure we can take is that very frequent just a rapid antigen test for these children.
Right. And for the sake of our viewers, Dr. Dan, what can you tell us about the specific symptoms with regard to Omicron?
Well, for Omicron, it seems like there seems to be less loss of taste and smell compared to the Delta variant. And there seems to be more sore throat, fever, cough, and diarrhea associated with the Omicron variant. But I think the important thing, though, is if you have an upper respiratory illness symptom this season, don't try to diagnose yourself at home by, trying to see if you can still smell some flowers or perfume and then use that as a test, a litmus test to see whether or not you have COVID. The important thing is, even if we are prioritizing our testing, right now we do have the capacity to test 850,000 people per day. So it's worthwhile to go and get tested to make sure that you don't have COVID. Also, if you have symptoms, please self-isolate, because whether it's COVID, the flu, or just a cold, you really don't want to be spreading this to other people. And so you do want to self-isolate until your symptoms have resolved.
Right, of course. Dr. Kim, what has been disclosed thus far about the rates of reinfection and breakthrough infections amid the emergence of Omicron?
Well, we actually heard about some reinfection case just early in the pandemic in probably Hong Kong. And then there are actually two different ways of we can get actually immunity against the virus. One is through the natural infection, and the other is the vaccination. And for this coronaviruses, for these respiratory viruses, to get actually just a protective immunity, just sterilizing immunity is very, very different. And then the one way actually we can attain this is we actually develop some mucosal immunity. And then that actually can effectively just block the infection. But then the mucosal immunity is very short-lived, and then also very short-lived, so we can actually expect that this kind of a short-lived the immunity can protect for so long time. So in terms of reinfection for the natural infection cases, once we just infected with the Omicron, and basically at least we can just develop antibodies very specific to the Omicron. So that very short after the Omicron infection, we probably can be just protected by the reinfection with the Omicron. But the antibodies actually just wanes very quickly, well, compared to the T cell responses. So then the reinfection is kind of inevitable, over the long time. And then for the vaccination also, for the vaccines that were actually developed for the original SARS-CoV-2 cannot actually protect infection, although we can protect from the severe diseases. But for the recent booster shot, although antibody is not really specific for the Omicron variant, if the titer, the amount of antibody is so high, then this antibody can actually a little bit just block the infection. But this is actually after very short, only just a short period after the booster shot. So in the end, this antibody is wanes, then we can get infected. But the good thing is that we still have a very robust T cell responses, which can actually just prevent the severe disease due to the Omicron.
Right, I see. All right then, Dr. Kim, as always, thank you very much for your thoughts today. Dr. Dan, thank you for joining us live at this hour.
Thank you.